Hi, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Unmasking Autism with AFO. As always, I'm your host, Carley Marissa, and I am very excited for our guests today because they are just one of the most amazing people that I personally know, and I'm so grateful to call her my friend and my colleague, Malayna Hasmanis.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming today. Super excited. I just always love getting to see your face too. So we have a lot to talk about today. And before I dive into like how we know each other and all the great things that we've done together, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So a little about me. I'm not from Oklahoma. I am from Charleston, South Carolina. I come from a big family of 5 of us kids, and 2 of my siblings are a big reason why I think I've gone into the path that I've gone in today. And I have a sister with Down syndrome, and I have a brother with autism. And it has been really, I think, conducive to where I went into my career, where my background is in education. I was a teacher and an administrator for several years, both in the States, but also abroad, and just have really loved the impact of education. But that's kind of evolved over the years, where now I wear a few different hats within the nonprofit and education space. So I have the privilege of serving as the executive director of NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness for our Tulsa region, and have the opportunity to coordinate and teach as faculty in Langston's Second Chance Pell Program. So it's for justice-impacted individuals who are currently incarcerated, and we go to the prison and lead education programs just like any other individual who's enrolled in our bachelor's in business administration. Just a little bit more creative sometimes when navigating the setting of it being at a prison, but that's been a wonderful experience, and teach in a few other programs in schools, and then have had the privilege of being a founder of an awesome nonprofit that's all volunteer oriented and grassroots around breaking down barriers and building bridges for individuals with disabilities for a more inclusive tomorrow, and what that may look like, and working collaboratively with partners. And that's through Unity Forward Oklahoma, which has really exposed a plethora of opportunities to collaborate with partners. But outside of that, proud bonus mom and proud fur dog mom and all the things. But just excited to be here today.
Yeah, no, you are one of the, honestly, I mean it, like most inspiring people that I know. I know I've told you before, but sometimes when I feel bogged down, I genuinely think to myself, what would Malayna do?
I would not go that far.
It's true. I mean, and that's one reason I wanted to have you on today, is because, we've known each other for a few years now, and we've done a lot of work together. And I just, you do such amazing things for your community. And I think it'll be really inspiring for other autistic people and caregivers to hear about your journey. Yeah. I love you so much.
I know, I love you.
Okay, so when we first met, I don't think you had, found out you had autism. Mm-hmm. So would you talk to people a little bit about, being late diagnosed and all of that journey for you?
Absolutely. So you're right. I did not get diagnosed until much later into my adult years, and that journey looked a little bit different. It wasn't something where I woke up one day and thought, I really should be assessed for autism. And it also doesn't work that quickly. We're going to be real about our systems and some areas of improvement. I actually began that journey when I was in therapy, really processing grief. And it was when I first moved to Oklahoma, I was engaged at the time to a wonderful man named Avery, and he unfortunately passed away due to cancer. And it happened when I was here in Oklahoma. It was actually within the first year. It was a wild, wild journey, and went back to therapy to process some of the grief and pieces. And the therapist that I was working with, she was aware of my diagnosis of having ADHD. I had navigated my journey with depression and anxiety in the past, and we just had some conversations around what I was experiencing, and just those conversations evolve as you're getting support. And she had experience supporting individuals who are neurodivergent, and I just remember just venting to her with some frustrations I had that were inherently due to masking and frustrations around just misinterpretations of social cues. And I just was like, why do people not get X, Y, Z, and brrr, you know, and all these things? And she's like, hey, I think maybe, like, I can't diagnose you, but I think this may be something to explore because you are demonstrating some things that could be worth exploring an assessment. And at first I was very kind of taken off guard, not in the sense of having that diagnosis of being a negative thing. I just hadn't thought of exploring that. And I think when we began to have some conversations and I explored those next steps, it began to make a lot of sense. But then you're also going through like a whole healing journey in that space too, because then you're like, wow, there are all these times where looking back, this makes a lot of sense. And I think like you kind of grieve those moments where like you misinterpreted those social situations, and you grieve being misunderstood, and you grieve not having those tools at that time to navigate really hard situations. And I think for me, I'm so grateful to have this diagnosis now, because I think I can utilize it as an opportunity to challenge some of those misconceptions that people have. And there are still times where I'll share that I have a diagnosis, and it's very interesting, I guess, for lack of a better word, to see how people react and to hear some of the pieces. Oh, I would never think you have autism. Like, well, what does autism look like? I'm very confused by, because I missed that memo.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that I'm so grateful for having this diagnosis later in life, because I can now utilize it as an opportunity to challenge the lack of representation for women in research, how we need to do a better job of fully looking at the scope of autism and not just stereotypes aligned and associated with some of those experiences. And but it was something that I don't think, if it wasn't for my therapist flagging some of those pieces and us having that rapport and that trust for me to kind of share what was going on in my mind and some things I didn't realize were just not fully in alignment with my truth and my journey. And it's been a really great experience now that I've really had an opportunity to own that and embrace that. And it's something where I'm hopeful I can continue to use my experience of being late diagnosed and having my own journey of being an autistic woman, that we can begin to expand those conversations and embrace visibility around what this looks like, just so then we're not pigeonholing people into not feeling comfortable to live that. And it's something where I talk about it all the time. Like when so in classes that I teach as a college professor, it's something I talk about all the time of like, what does this look like in the business space? What does this look like in the education space? And how we can't limit these labels that we're putting on people. And yes, I have autism, but these are strengths that I bring to the table as an autistic woman. These are strengths I bring to the table in a strategic leadership session. These are strengths of having people on your team that have autism, and things that you need to be mindful of and adapting in that space and kind of putting that ownership. And so I've just tried to really, through that diagnosis journey, utilizing this to now really embrace that vulnerability and help to reshape how people have those limited misconceptions around autism.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think people are starting to get a little bit better in the employment sector. The CEO of Palantir is on a big kick right now. I don't know if you've seen it, but he's on a big kick right now where he's saying straight up, if you're not neurodivergent, don't waste your time going to college. Not saying college is a waste of time. Those are his words. Right. Not mine. But, like they have a whole initiative where they are actively, for the next few years, their priority is to recruit and attract and hire neurodivergent talent. But obviously employment that's going to be something we get to in a little bit because, so having grown up with a sibling with autism and then not obtaining your diagnosis till later in life, was there anything after you got diagnosed where you were sort of looking back at your life with your sibling and seeing like similarities or, oh, how did I miss this? Or, oh, we're so different in this way? Because like you said, autism, like, when people are like, oh my God, you don't look autistic. It's like, well, what do you,
right.
Want me to perform an autism? Like,
should I get it tattooed on my forehead? Like, I'm confused. Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. There were a lot of, so my brother Spencer And he's given me permission to share his experiences because it was very different growing up in a lot of ways. I think how we've reacted to moments of being like overstimulated or navigating like masking where that was a necessity in really feeling safe in social situations also looked very different, even when looking back. Spencer, for his journey, I think it was different in the sense of how more outward his expressions were, and coupled with some other mental health. He had other mental health diagnoses that I think also kind of adapted how that showed up. And so, looking back at our journeys and comparing it to mine, I think I was able, although there wasn't an identical journey that we went through, I think he's younger than me, and I remember being very protective of Spencer because in school settings there were teachers, and this is why I went into education, but I always think back to his school days because I was blown away. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I was blown away at how educators treated him. Not all, but some, and the lack of patience for his quote-unquote meltdowns, or him just watching teachers just allow his peers to just bully him relentlessly, and not being there to be a safe place and to help give guidance to Spencer in terms of, hey, I think this is where you're misunderstanding this social situation, or hey, that was a joke, or trying to walk alongside Spencer and guide him. And I just remember that was the first time I ever got in trouble in school, was basically cussing out a teacher because I was just shocked of like, how could you, and like I got in a lot of trouble. But I remember just having so much compassion and really trying to push teachers and our peers, because we're only 2 years apart, of being like, no, this is, they're like, oh, he's so weird, he's so this. No, he's creative and he's kind and he's thoughtful. And these are things, reframing how we were perceiving some of these misalignments and social expectations. And I think although we weren't identical in our experiences, that compassion and that grace and that love that I gave to Spencer, I tried to give to myself as an adult, because I think at first, I don't look back and think, wow, we were so similar, because we could not be more different. Even in how our autism shows up, could not be more different. But I'm so grateful for that, because it has given me another perspective. But I think that compassion and that grace has been helpful for me, because I think you just go through with being late diagnosed, just I don't know, it's such an interesting journey, because it's just like you have this like shift of like, it makes a lot of sense, but then you're like, how did so many people miss this? Or like, how did I go this long not knowing this? And knowing how misunderstood you are, and you're like, I really meant it in this way, and people are perceiving it in this way. And I tried to not own that and just like, this is who I am and these are my strengths, and kind of that same way of reframing I tried to do for myself that I did for Spencer, because I know that was really helpful, because he would break down a lot of like, they think I'm weird, they think I'm this, and like, no, you're not weird, you're creative. And that man can make like a stick and turn it into like the coolest sculpture ever, and just like has these awesome gifts and things where I'm like, okay, I have gifts too, and I just don't fit that mold, and I don't want to fit that mold. And I remember telling Spencer that too, like, you don't want to be like everyone else. Like, why would you want to be like everyone else? And so to answer that question, like, no, we didn't have a lot of similarities, but I think some of the ways that I tried to just be a good sister to him, but also just like that protector, I tried to do that to myself. Just in hindsight, or just kind of retroactively as you're looking back. But we didn't have a lot of similarities in how it's shown up. And I mean, Spencer got a diagnosis, or received his diagnosis, when he was like 3 or 4, which is pretty common when we think about some of the discrepancies and inequities within our system. But it is something that, although it is very different, I'm so grateful, because I just think it really painted an imprint in who I am, and just to really truly accept and love people for who they are, because that's what we all want, right? Regardless of a diagnosis or not. Spencer and my sister Savannah have been really key cornerstones in that journey for me.
you said, well, how many, how did it go this long without anybody noticing?
Yeah.
And I think we know a few reasons why.
Right, totally.
And you're talking about the inequities in the system. And I think a big part of that is, well, a lot of people don't know how to properly examine autism. And if they do, they're looking at it from a male lens because it's still very much like a male stereotypical disorder, and when you're saying, oh, Spencer and I, don't present in a lot of the same ways.
Right.
I think that's because autism is different with females than it is with males,
Totally.
And I feel like that's why a lot of women, there's a lot of differences between males and females and how autism presents in them. And I think a lot of people who hold the power to frame the narrative and, give diagnosis, they're not looking at it in that way. They're still looking at it from a very male-centered POV. And I think that that's why a lot of women, such as yourself, like go well into adulthood before they are able to obtain, the proper diagnosis.
Yeah.
So because of all of your education and your background, is there anything in that sense that you would, that you think would be a positive step in the right direction?
In terms of?
Like what's something that people can do if they want to make sure they're a mental health provider? If they want to make sure they're taking the right steps to be able to be like fully informed and well-rounded, what is something you think that they could do to be that way?
In terms of serving individuals
with autism, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it is, unfortunately, research that's out there. And I think, like you had mentioned at the beginning, we've made some positive strides of doing better. We're not all the way there yet. I think we still have a long ways to go. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of our research is still, and we think about who is a part of those research studies and pulling research from those additional sources still heavily reflects the male experience. And I think we have to be careful not to lean too much into theory and research because it's just not representative yet. And that's something we talk a lot about. I think for like a mental health provider, an educator, my gosh, a manager at an organization, anywhere, I think one of the spaces for us to learn and do better is being quick to just show up to spaces where we're seeing these panels and conversations happen in real time, because I think that's where we're challenging these misconceptions a lot of the time too. And so I think that space is very helpful, and being cognizant of really thinking through how we create spaces to invite those different perspectives and to invite individuals to share how their experiences may differ from what we may perceive as the autistic experience. And I think we hear this saying all the time of, you've met one person with autism, then you've just met one person with autism. And I think that's very true, because we cling so heavily into these stereotypes of like, for the male archetype especially, like obsessed with, trains or like, oh, they have to be great at math and all the, I'm like, what? No, like it's not this limited checklist of this is what autism is. Yeah. And I think it's also leaning into understanding some of the terminology of like, what is masking and what does that look like for individuals, and how does autism show up externally, but how does it show up internally? Because I think for women especially, that's where we miss these opportunities. I know that's like when I was really processing and even continuing to go into therapy after I got my diagnosis, of just feeling so like frustrated of how it went undiagnosed and like missed. And it is, a lot of that is internal, and like how you're overcompensating for some things, and that inherently hurts your mental health. And I think that is something where if there can be a solid understanding around internal and external representations and leaning into quality research that's out there, which there is some that is out there, and really leaning into the information that's shared by organizations that are rooted in these communities, I think that's how we'll do better of just really taking in this information and not just, hey, I found this article from 15 years ago that's incredibly outdated and still reflects these pieces. I think that's how we stick in those, lack for a better word, backwards practices, and then we're just perpetuating gaps that are just very hurtful for people. And so I think it is a lot of that, and then just continuing to embrace opportunities for growth and to do better. Because I mean, to your point of even certain workforce stakeholders being focused on neurodivergent recruitment in these different spaces, I think we have to really learn first and then see the value of how that really improves everything for all of us too.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You know, when it comes to masking, everyone's doing that.
Yeah, sure.
Everyone does it.
Totally.
Like, it's not, you know, inherently like an autistic thing.
Sure.
And I don't know for you, but when I've like tried to like mesh it in that way to people, like, well, everyone's doing it, like you also have done it.
Yep.
And a lot of it's like their brains kind of explode.
Yeah.
They're like, oh wait, oh my god,
making it
no.
relatable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when you're nervous, you mask, and like, I'm not nervous. I love this. Like,
Yeah, or you're going
like,
into a job interview,
Totally.
you know,
Yeah.
on a first date, or, you know, there's a lot of, you know, time. Everyone is masking, you know, just like I think most people stem in some capacity. I'm not saying everyone is autistic, but I'm saying there's things that, you know, like people shaking their leg and, you know, doing whatever. Like that's something like a lot of people can relate to.
Totally.
Because they do. But I really do. I don't know about how it is for you, but for me, I know in therapy, we talk a lot about how my brain is like a computer that just cannot shut down. Like, you know, like it's just constantly.
Yep.
The processor is running constantly. And I do feel like for me, a lot of my autism is happening inside of my head.
All the time.
I might not be like you said, like obsessed with trains or good at math. Like, if you put a gun to my head and asked me to do long division right now, I couldn't do it, you know?
Where's my calculator?
But it's happening inside of my head all of the time, like to the point where my therapist thinks sometimes I miss out on what's happening in front of me and like the moments in life that are going on because I can't shut the computer down. I'm scanning and thinking and analyzing and trying to figure out what it means and why did they just look that over in that direction and, you know, like, and I know you and I have had these conversations before where it's like, but they said it like this though.
Yeah,
like,
so surely it means this. It's like this whole rabbit hole. And,
and I, as a woman with autism, I wish people would talk about that more or understand that more, that for women a lot of the time the autism is happening in our heads.
Yes.
Like,
all the time.
All the time. I mean, you know, it's very few and far between where and then when I catch myself doing it, I'm like, dang it, I just took myself out of it. You know, but like moments in which I feel like my brain is shut off and I am fully present and in the moment and taking it in, especially when I'm around other people. Yeah. You know, and I think for me, because I can really only ever speak about myself, that's one of the most impactful things for my mental health is the inability to get out of my head. Yeah. I don't know why that made me tear up, but it did.
But I think it's something that people just don't realize. I mean, to your point, like it's like you're like code switching in your head where it's like it makes me think, although I'm not saying it's identical, but like it reminds me of like when I lived abroad. And when I lived in South Korea and like you're taking in, it's like a whole different culture. It is when you're interacting and serving with those who are not neurodivergent and thinking about like to your point of like, what does this mean? What are the cultural implications of this action? Or like that tone was a little snippy, but I don't think I did anything, but maybe I did do something and I didn't think about it. And it's like you're running through this so quick before you can even respond. And then you're expected to like think on your feet. And, you know, especially for like for me, I sometimes if I know it's going to be a presentation or whatever, I like to script things out so I can like really think through like what in the world am I about to say, because who knows what's about to come out of this mouth. And then it is one of those things where then you're like weighing in and then you're thinking about like the social expectations and the social norms. If you're playing in like office politics where you're like, oh, well, they have this role and I have this role, and then and it's like it's so ridiculous. But then it's like after a meeting, it's like, wow, I feel like I just ran a freaking marathon. Like, my brain hurts. And because you're having, like you said, like just process so much stuff that people just don't realize it. And then you're also having to think of like, how does my face look? Do I look,
I
know, because then heaven forbid that, I'm not.
I know. You have RBF, like,
And
yes.
so it's like, you need to think about your tone, or am I being too direct? Because I value direct communication, but if I'm too direct, then it's going to be, and just all these questions where you're like, all that's running through just to respond to a question of, hey, can you give me an update on XYZ? And you're like, why, yes. And in that split second, all these things have just turned in your head. And then you're having to then, at least for me, I'm overthinking that whole experience of like, I should have said this differently, or like, maybe I was a little bit too direct, or overthinking, like you had shared, someone's shift in tone, or maybe a body language piece where you're like, what did they mean by that? But then it's, if you're not around folks that you feel safe to kind of share that internal processing with, at least for me, I like ruminate of like, dang, now they think I'm rude, or now they think I'm this, or, or I completely just ruined that interaction. In reality, it's not that, or if it's someone that I feel safe with, like I know I've called you after me, like, okay, did I come across like I feel like I was a little snippy, and you're like, no, all is good. But if you don't have that safe person, or that, someone that you feel like you could be honest about that dialogue with, you're just stuck with it. And like, I know that's where like it has felt super overwhelmed. So you're like, I just have to hold this in and then just wait until the next thing to observe and wonder if it has anything to do with you or not. And it's just, and sometimes it doesn't. And I get that because, life doesn't revolve around you, but it's like all of these things are compounded where I can't help but think of it as being like code switching, or when I lived in another country, like having to translate, it's like translating nonstop. And you're just like, I just need to sit in silence for 2 minutes and watch some dog videos or pet a dog or something.
Facts. No, like, dogs are life. Dogs are life.
Not going to judge me.
They can't even talk, but we're having a conversation.
Yeah, I know I'm a good person. I don't mean any harm. I'm being too direct.
I know you love me for me, baby.
Exactly.
100%. God, dogs, seriously. I know we're both big dogs, but I like that you said that it's like translating in your mind, because for a long time when people would ask me, well, what's having autism like? You can never explain it. And I don't mean to be like exclusive when I say it, but it's just like, if you don't have autism, I can tell you to the best of my ability what it's like. You will not understand. You can't sit with us unless you have it. And I don't, again, not trying to be rude, but there's just no way to properly explain it. But it does feel like living in a world where everyone else is speaking a language that is not your native tongue, and trying to even be fluent in that language is just like
you're like A for effort, but
no, for real. And then I want to talk a little bit about unmasking for a second too, because now there's this big thing, or not now, but and I know it's a good thing, but unmasking, right? And it's like, sometimes I wonder if, because I'm so in my head, if I ever will be fully able to unmask.
Sure.
But then, and I don't know if you ever feel that way, but then it's like sometimes when I do feel like, oh, I'm just being me, I'm unmasking, then people do think I'm weird, or I think I'm hiding my autism. And then people are like, oh no, I see it, girl. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. I actually asked a friend who has an autistic son a few weeks ago, who they're level 2, I think. And we were just chatting, and I was like, but do you see autism on me? And she was like, yeah. And I'm just like, oh, okay. And then I leave, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, but what about me as autistic? What?
Yeah.
Because I think that's also something that women, period, to be a woman is almost from birth to be all right, so now you have to fit into society.
It's unreal. It's be this, but not too much of this.
Yeah.
It's an impossible balancing act. And then you add a little autism in there, and you're like, great. Set up to fail.
For real. But it's and I'm not saying this is right. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's whatever. But you do want to assimilate. you know, and since I was diagnosed as a kid, you know, I've gone my whole life being like, oh, I know I'm autistic, but I don't want to seem like I am, because if I don't seem autistic, then people are going to like me more. So then it's like when people do let me know that, they're like, oh, no, girl, like, I see the autism in you. It really does. Sometimes I'm like, well, what is that? Like, like, what about me says autism? Because when I watch like Love on the Spectrum, for example, I don't see myself reflected back in that.
I totally agree with that, or I relate to that. Yeah, I totally relate to that.
Do you ever feel that way? Yeah.
Oh, in terms of like, where can I fully unmask versus? Yes. Yeah, I think, and I appreciate your note of like the pressure that it feels as a woman, of just like, if we don't even acknowledge or talk about the autism piece, just as a woman in general, like it is just, you know, our system at play is designed the way that it is for a reason. And it's challenging because you have all these expectations. And it's something where I think something about me, maybe it's like the justice piece of autism where I'm like, screw that. Like, I am not going to be defined. Like, and I think I just naturally challenge that, you know, where it's like, I think I've just naturally been attracted to this like, oh, is that the expectation, where I'm going to burn that expectation down? And I just, because I am so, it is so frustrating and it's so silly and just like doesn't, like, so for example, like, as you know, like I'm covered in tattoos. And for some reason that has relevance in education, where I'm like, I'm sorry, what in the world that has nothing to do with my education, has nothing to do with my ability to provide, you know, instruction, whatever, or my ability to be an instructor or to be a nonprofit director. Not relevant to if I wear fake eyelashes or not. If I want them to be 16 feet long, I will make sure they're 16 feet long and I will bat you away. Like, you know, like it's so silly. Or like, you know, be nice but not too, like it's just like, ugh. And it's so frustrating. And then when you add the layer of, you know, masking, and it is something of, masking is something that we have to do as women in general when navigating the workplace. You know, don't be too emotional, or, you know, all those stereotypes that we add that are just so silly. And I do feel like there are very few, but there are some people I do feel safe of just being like, this is me through and through. And it's so nice because it just like, I relate to just feeling like your brain is just going all the time, where I'm like, I just need to like not make a decision for a second. I just want to just like breathe and not think for a minute, and not feel like I have to just double down and just interpreting everything, where I'm like, good grief, how do people navigate in such vagueness? Or like, how do you know those are the rules? Like, how do you receive a list of rules? You know, like where is that at? But it's when you do have those people that I feel safe, and I say safe because I don't feel judged. If, you know, if I'm chilling with RBF, I know they're not gonna be like, oh, she looks like, no, she's just chilling. That's just Malayna, like, it's just what she looks like. You know, oh, like, just whatever pieces are happening with me, like, those people I feel safe around doing that are so crucial. And I try, though, in those spaces where, like, I know it is an expectation to navigate some meetings in a particular way. I really do try to bring up my diagnosis, not in like a, hey, guess what, surprise. Like, it is something where I'm like, you know, to mitigate any potential opportunities for misunderstanding, I will share, like, I value direct communication. Here are the reasons I value direct communication. I prefer to deliver direct communication. And if it's something where maybe there is a misunderstanding, or it can hurt your feelings, or whatever that may be, I try to use it as a bridge for us to meet in the middle. But like, I just don't have the capacity or will to cover some of those things up about me, or, you know, like, I think I can mask to a point, but then there are just things where I'm like, I've tried to really lean in of like, okay, I'm going to adapt. I need you to adapt too. And I think that there can be a shared space, because then not only am I holding space for myself, but I think then you're holding space for others who probably don't feel safe asking or sharing those pieces. And we're still in a society where people don't feel safe sharing their diagnosis. And like, I know it's unfortunately a risk sometimes where I bring it up, and people are like, oh, like, do you have any repercussions for sharing? No, I don't. But it's one of those that I want to continue to challenge those norms, because I think those norms are outdated, and I think they're hurtful. And I think that we just have to do better of not just jumping to a negative assumption of someone of like, oh, they're direct, they must be rude. No, let's talk about it. Like, let's reframe some of those pieces. Or like, you know, like the stemming, like you shared, like, again, doesn't mean you have autism if you stem, but it's like, can we, and I think we've seen some natural progressions of things where like things have adapted to where people feel safer to show up in those, their full authentic self. I just think there's such value in being authentic. But for us to get there, we just have to have those crucial conversations of like, what, like why? Yeah. I guess it's just the big thing. And sometimes I just get to a point where I'm just like, okay, tell me why that matters. Or like, why are we holding such value in like vagueness? Why are we holding such value in indirect communication? What does that do for anyone? And then it's like, oh my gosh, that's wild. And we're like, okay, great. Let's, you know, no more. Great. Thank you.
I know. I mean, no, for real. Like, I don't know when it got to the point where like to just type a sentence with a period in an email is like interpreted as, oh, this person's being rude. It's like, I'm telling you something.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like, can we lean into this space of assuming positive intent? Yeah. Like, okay, they have a period. That does not imply, oh my gosh, they hate me. Yeah. No. And also I don't need to send like, you know, a blast of confetti when I'm sending it. I know. I tend to probably add a little bit more fluff than I should. That's just my style.
I know it is. It is.
But it is. Yeah. But it's also something of like, I don't interpret it, you know, if I get a period back, but some people do. And it is frustrating where it's like, I try to hold space of like, okay, but why? Like, let's talk about that. Yeah. Like, why are we assuming that person is X, Y, Z? And it's funny because I do it all the time with my business students where I'm like, y'all, like those are expectations that are outdated, they're harmful, and it's serving limited lived experiences and not truly reflective. And like if you are not an inclusive leader, you're not a strategic leader. Sorry about you, but that's the truth.
No,
and
it is true.
I think it is something where like the politics and all these just like, it's so silly to me because I just think that there's a lot of strength and benefit that comes into it when we're adaptable and we see the value that brings. And I think it's just really rooted in assuming positive intent in others and just seeing like, what does that, I think just being considerate, like what does that person need in that space? Okay, great. Okay, they value direct communication. Let me adapt to that. Regardless of a diagnosis or not, we should want to do that to ensure our teams are successful. And it's just really reframing that of really helping us to make those moves forward. But it is an uphill battle sometimes. We're like, why are we like dying on this hill?
I know. And that's the thing is everyone needs something. Like you said, like regardless of diagnosis or not, like everybody needs something. Like you might have zero diagnosis and just not like the way coffee smells, but you know, like your office is near the coffee maker and so that's really bothering you. So can you switch up? That's an accommodation that
costs nothing.
It costs nothing. And it makes like, it's coming together to make the workplace better. Like
and now they're showing up as their best self. They're not agitated. Like all is good. Like for me, I keep my door closed if I'm trying to focus on something. And you know, I remember that in some spaces where I've worked, it's like, oh, she's not a team player. She's standoffish. I'm like, no, I will literally get distracted if I hear like, or if you come in, I can't get focused again. And so it's like, I think there are great learning opportunities where it's like, it's just adapting for what's best for the team. And it doesn't have to be this negative piece. And I think that's really something I hope more people can stray away from. It's like, oh, if they're not like me, then they must, you know, just assuming these negative things from like, but why? Like, if you wouldn't want someone to interpret that situation like that and assume a negative about you, why are you doing that to others? And I think that's just an area of growth that people in general could really embrace and just do better. Or like the coffee piece, like it wasn't the exact coffee situation, but have been in some situations where it's similar, where it's just moving the desk or like they like to have dim lights because it just helps in that capacity. Yeah. Cool. But it being perceived like, oh my gosh, that is so over the top and okay, we have got to cut that out. Like it's not over the top. It's not someone, and I think that's something I'd really like for us to retire for good because it's harmful and it makes people not feel safe to bring that up without negative repercussions or, you know, potential misconceptions from their team members, and then people suffer in silence, and that's really not okay. When we shouldn't just put a blanket settings on people of like, hey, if we're gonna have LED lights and coffee brewing throughout the building, everyone's gonna like it and hope it sounds great to you. Like, that would not work in any universe ever. So I don't know why we were shocked when there are a few people that we need to adapt, and cool, like make it work. Accommodations don't cost a lot, and that's really if anything depending on the accommodation, and that's a big misconception. I know Kathy from AFO has come and done some awesome trainings for my classes where I'm like, please explain this, because this is, again, something we have to retire and park and no longer bring forward with us because it's so harmful.
I agree. I really like how you keep saying we should lead with positive intent. We should assume, it's a positive thing before it's a negative thing. I mean, and I think a lot of people feel this way, or at least that's what Reddit says to me. But, like, we have to work, right? Like, we have to work. Like, unless you were born with a trust fund, more power to you. Like, you have to work. And I think sometimes where I'm like, well, is it my autism that I just don't understand this? Or like, is it just like a societal thing? But, why sometimes like does working, like you're saying, like people, feel negative or they feel afraid to like say something or ask for a simple accommodation. Like, I feel like if we all have to do this thing, then we should all be like as comfortable as possible with the place we're spending the majority of our life, week after week, month after month, year after year, until we die. Like, and like the shut door thing. Like, I'm the same way. Like, if I had an office, I'd want my door shut. Yeah. Because I'd be one of those people that would need a sign that would be like, do not talk to me.
I literally have that where I'm like, focus, please.
But it's seen as rude. It, like, closed off, not a team player. Like, oh, they think they're better than me. Or like, and it sometimes, it just is so frustrating because it's like those small, teeny, tiny, little, minute, societal, unspoken things where it's like, who determined this is the rule? How did they spread it around?
Yeah. Where is this rule book?
Like, can we rewrite it?
Can we please shred it?
And it's like neurodivergent people do bring a benefit into a neurotypical setting because they are kind of shaking it up. They might say something that then like maybe someone who like, I don't know, like has OCD or something, it's like, oh my God, thank God they said it because now maybe I could.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's a win-win.
Yeah, and I don't understand why. I don't know. Those are just the things I get sometimes really caught up on, where I'm just like, why did they do that? Like when I get an email that's full of exclamation points, I feel like I'm being screamed at, and it's like, girl, no, I know. I just get excited. No, I do it too. But like, that's the thing is, I know you and I have talked about emails before too, where it's like, why are we thinking so much about these emails?
I know.
Like, I need to just tell you what I need to tell you, and then like, but it's like, like,
oh, it's so true though. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous.
I mean, it really is. Like, for talk about emails for a second. Like, I do love you, I do, but I do. You go that extra mile that I just. Cannot go anymore.
I get it. It's happy whatever day of the week it is. And we're going to add some color up in there, sprinkle some exclamation.
I know, and I love it. I think it's great. And then, I send out an email that's like, good afternoon. Here it is. Talk to you later. Like,
but it gives you what you need. And like, it's like, hey, but I think it's like, to your point, I like when you were asking like, who in the world made these rules up? Yeah. And we have to do better of how we're training and just exposing people in the workforce to, even before they enter the workforce, to understanding how to just not be so provincial and not be so focused on one lived experience. If we're going to isolate it to something as simple as like the neurotypical experience. And because I think like we have a huge way to improve even when it comes to like culturally being more inclusive and being more inclusive for individuals who are neurodivergent, but we aren't talking about it in schools. We're not talking about it for those who are HR professionals, and we're not giving them those tools to know like how to navigate that if you don't have either that lived experience yourself or have someone in your life that has that lived experience or have read a book, that reflects that experience. Like, but it is something where like I'll tell my students who are business students where I'm like I've brought up, like I wear noise canceling headphones and I'm, and I close my door and these are things that are helpful to me and allow me to produce my best work and shouldn't be misconstrued as X, Y, Z or the other, and how toxic it can be to the work culture of like, you know, oh, she's not a team player because she closes her door. No, ma'am, that is not what that is. Yeah. And like that's toxic and that's unnecessary and that's not creating great rapport and great da-da. And like we have all these robust discussions in the class all the time where like I lead with that in the forefront all of my classes, and I'm so grateful because our students are walking away with a different perspective. And I have other instructors who put their lived experience there too, of not saying this is the North Star of like, this is my lived experience, therefore we have to, but it's just shifting some of that and like, okay, not looking at it as such a negative. And I just think if it could be something as just a first step as just assuming positive intent and just being curious with dignity and respect to that person of, you know, what is helpful to you, but we're just not there fully yet. And that's something where I think that we just have to do better of creating space for that. And I think sometimes it's just people getting out of their way and remembering that people are people first. They're not there just to produce what you're asking them to produce, not there just to fulfill those roles of that job. They're people first. And so for serving people, whether you're a manager, or that's a coworker, whatever, you should be leaning into the space of assuming positive intent, knowing that, hey, this is what's needed for them. Great. Period. Like we have to just leave the Judgy McJudgerson, whatever shenanigans that people bring to the space to the side, because I think that it's coming from a place of ignorance, but it's so hurtful. And then we're perpetuating these examples, or excuse me, not examples, these stereotypes that are so incorrect and so wrong. And then you're just creating more distance with people. Like I just remember there being such a fallout at one place that I worked, because I did keep my door closed all the time. And I had no idea that people thought I wasn't a team player. And like, then they like weren't inviting me to lunch anymore and they weren't like talking to me. And then my boss was like, oh yeah, people just think that you're not really friendly. I'm like, why? Like they don't think I'm friendly. Well, because you just keep your door closed. I'm like, because people are talking in the hall, I can't focus. And you're just like, what the French toast? Like where have I been? Because I did not know this was happening. You know, and it's just like, it's so... But I know I'm not alone in that. And it's all rooted in just people being quick to judge and not quick to understand. And I think that's just like a soft skill piece that people need to do better. Just like be kind. Like just like, no, autism or not, like just be kind and like assume the best and see why that person wants to navigate in that space and like keep your judgments to the side. Like I don't feel like that's rocket science, but in some spaces it sure golly feels that way.
No, it really does. You know, I ride hard for Reddit. Yeah. And I call it the people's platform. Yep. Because I feel like if you want to like get kind of like a pulse point on any topic, I mean, there's literally a subreddit for like anything you could possibly think of. That's so true. You can go to Reddit and you can go to that subreddit and you can just find it out. And, you know, and I think one reason people, obviously there's trolls and there's bots and there's all those things. Yeah. But I think, you know, one reason I like Reddit is because it's anonymous, you know, like unless people you're putting your who you are on blast on Reddit, which most people are not, like it is anonymous. Which do you? And I feel like people can be more honest. I follow a lot of like work subreddits like HR and interviewing and, you know, work culture and blah, blah, blah. And there's just thousands of subreddits that have to do with the corporate like workspace. And I read them every single day. It's probably a special interest, but like, because I want to know. And I feel like the more I learn and the more I advocate and the more I really try to get neurotypical people to like be inclusive of neurodivergent people, for me, I just feel like there's so much that like is just the human experience. It doesn't even really boil down to, well, I have autism and you don't. It boils down to we're both humans living in this day and age. And we both have a lot of things being put on us we didn't ask for. Like the workplace politics thing. Like I can't tell you how many Reddit stories I've read where people are like, well, I got passed up for a promotion and I think it's because I don't go out to lunch or I do keep my door. This one guy went on a whole rant about how like he used to keep candy in his office, but then too many people were coming in every day to get candy and then he couldn't get his work done. So then he took the candy away and then everybody thought he was an a-hole because he took the candy away and he didn't and you know, I'm just like, oh my God. And nowhere in that post did he say he had autism. But he was going off and I'm like, why is it this way though? Like
oh, it's ridiculous.
And it's at the end of the day, it's like, if I'm doing my job and like I'm doing it how you want, then can I keep my door closed? Can I wear my headphones? Can I like not talk to Tommy at the watering tank? Like
the watering hole?
Yeah, the water hole. You know
That's what I thought you were about to say. Like, okay.
You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know. I don't know if you ever feel that way, but I definitely do. I think,
oh, yeah.
It's like, these are just like human things that like someone decided so long ago, and then everybody else just kept up with it. And now everyone's suffering, when it would be better if it just like wasn't this way. And I think it would mainly be better for, yes, neurotypical people, but also neurodivergent people, because let's talk on employment for a minute. Statistically, 85% of people with autism can't gain, full-time pay. And I know you advocate about it. We advocate for it. So many of us in Oklahoma and worldwide are advocating for it, but it still seems to be such an issue.
Yeah.
And I still see where parents get to a point where they feel like the only way their child is going to have a job, a life, able to like get a paycheck, cash it, and feel good about the fact that they worked for their money and they earned it, is if they open up a business.
Yeah.
And I feel the job market, I know, sucks right now, period, but it's like, what can be done truly, really, that is not being done, I guess, where we can help people get a job? I mean,
I think a lot of that is the hiring and HR practices of businesses and organizations, truthfully, because I think about, like, to your point of, there are some individuals who are stakeholders and influencers who, our workforce has evolved a lot. Where, like, not that long ago, like, we had to advocate for 2-day weekends and like having that balance there, and minimum wage, which, like, whatever you want to call that, which, like, that's a very generous term. But it is something where, like, just the workforce in general, like, we struggle a lot of just adding value and seeing value in our workforce. But people who are in those roles for hiring, for communicating those job openings, for retaining staff, do not, I think, fully have the tools and the knowledge and the competency to ensure there are spaces for all individuals to be successful. Because then it turns into this ridiculous thing of, like, so for example, if someone as an accommodation needs a hybrid schedule, like, that's something I really thrive in, a hybrid schedule. I need a little alone time away from it. Just helps me really focus in those spaces, especially when it's like there are peaks where it's very heavy socialization and then having some time for me to be focused, and sometimes working from home is helpful in that capacity for me. But a common pushback I hear all the time is, well, if we make that exception for you, then we'll have to I'm like, what? This isn't like hey, I just want to chill at my house by with my dogs doing nothing. Like, this helps me produce my best work and be the best version of me for the team. It doesn't cost you anything. And I think it's like I had mentioned, just reframing of, we just have people who are not being focused on strength-based interviews, are not keeping it objective. We add, like, the layer of AI and how that comes into things, and how that's not really being inclusive when we think about how it interprets different pieces there. And I just think we have to do better of giving tools to people who are in these roles, whether it's a manager, HR, just staff in general, to really understand how to navigate things, to make places more inclusive, but also to see the value that it brings when we're not a homogeneous workforce. Like, there is value in having a mixture of individuals of all different skill sets. And, like, we talk about individuals who are neurodivergent, and, like, they're going to look at a project differently than a neurotypical individual. Like, if we're just going to talk about it from that frame point, and that's a strength. Like, they're going to see things that a neurotypical person is not. They're going to approach it differently than you. They're going to, and that's okay. But we don't currently see individuals who are neurodivergent as equals in all capacities. And that's a very harmful rhetoric and a very harmful piece that I think is creating high barrier entry points for workforce.
And it's a shame because, I mean, they've done studies, you know,
yeah.
where neurodivergent employees, we're making you money.
Mm-hmm.
We're advancing your ROI. Like, we actually, like, literally statistically bring a net positive to you employing us and having us there. But the high barriers that you just talked about, I mean, do you think that's getting worse? Sometimes I feel like it is getting worse. But then again, I'm saying that from a certain point of privilege where I am an autistic adult and I do have a full-time job.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, like, is it coming down to, like, some people just, like, don't care? Like, because sometimes I feel like that is really what's happening is some people, they don't care. They see a person who presents differently and the first thing they think to themselves is, problem.
I do think that there is still some of that, which is unfortunate. I also speak from a place of privilege where I know, you know, having education and the experiences I have, I think that's why I'm like I'm so invested in sharing, or where there are spaces for me to share about my diagnosis, because I know just the reality of it, there's some safety to me being able to share it and know that I have the education in spaces where I know I won't be ousted because of that, which is a terrible thing to say, but that's the truth. And it is something where I think that there are very much still people who are like, that's different. I don't rock with different. I'm going to stick to the status quo. And that's a hard pass for me. When in reality, what the issue is in that situation is that person who's pushing away that talent and pushing away that person because they're not open to learning, and because they're being provincial and they're being very closed-minded and really seeing how they need to adapt and they need to change and they need to learn different skills. And I mean, for goodness sakes, we have people who are leading organizations who don't know how to attach a PDF to an email, let alone,
That's true.
you know, really reframe what accommodations are and how we even go about ensuring that that is provided across the board, or how we are creating strengths-based interviews instead of like the same old, you know, approach. And I think that that is something where eventually, if other organizations that are not so opposed to growth embrace that, I know those organizations will eventually wither when we think about the strengths that neurodivergent talent brings to the table. It's just unfortunately for those who are against that growth or just are very stuck in their ways, I think we do still see that. And it sucks, for lack of a better word, because it's just it's very harmful. And I think it can be incredibly devastating, not just to that person who's trying to obtain employment, but it's devastating to the team that's currently there, because what does that communicate? And then it makes me think about people who are there who may need those supports, who won't get that. And now they know I sure as heck can never get that.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to reinstill this level of fear of what are those repercussions going to be if I need that. And I'm just going to quietly keep on going until I can't do it anymore. And then we have burnout, and then it's very harmful. But no, we totally still have people who are there. And it's ridiculous because of all the research that's out there and all the things that are available to really help us reframe these pieces. But it's just the reality that we live in, where I think that there's just a lot of room for us to continue to meet people where they're at in those spaces, where we'd love to connect with those people and be like, hey, tell me more about that. And I think that's where I get really eager to share, well, I have autism. Like, so tell me, like, what about this is harmful to your business? What about that approach, or me having a hybrid approach, is harmful to you? Does that cost you anything? No, it doesn't. Okay, great. So then why are we? And it's wild how as we start trickling and losing out on these excuses which they are excuses, when we won't embrace that, we kind of just look silly. So I always invite like those conversations to better understand, but no, we totally still see those everywhere, unfortunately.
Alrighty, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to what will be part 1 of my conversation with Malayna Hasmanis. And again, if you live in the Oklahoma City area and you're looking for social connection and you're a neurodivergent adult, please visit autismfoundationok.org to check out our monthly socials. And if you live in the Tulsa area and you're looking for that social connection, please visit Unity Forward of Oklahoma on Facebook to check out their monthly socials for neurodivergent adults. And we'll see you for part 2.